The words hit me like ice water. "You're out. This business never belonged to you." My mother's voice was steady, clinical even, as she delivered what felt like a death sentence across the mahogany conference table that had witnessed 23 years of my life's work. I sat there, frozen, watching her manicured fingers tap against the leather portfolio that contained, I assumed, the legal documents that would strip away everything I'd built. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look like a stranger. But then again, maybe she always had been. "Mom, you can't be serious." The words came out smaller than I intended, barely above a whisper. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my ribs from the inside. "I've given everything to Meridian Consulting. Everything!" She didn't even blink. "Genevieve, dear, let's not be dramatic. You've been compensated well over the years. Very well." Her tone was the same one she'd used when I was 12 and caught sneaking cookies before dinner. Condescending, dismissive. My brother Thatcher shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside her, avoiding my eyes. He knew. Of course he knew. They'd planned this together, probably over their weekly mother-son dinners that I was never invited to anymore. The same dinners where they'd apparently decided that my 45% stake in the company I'd helped grow from a 3-person operation to a multi-million-dollar consulting firm was somehow negotiable. "The clients trust you, Genevieve, but they trust the Meridian name more," she continued, flipping through pages with deliberate slowness. "And that name stays with family. Real family. Real family." The phrase lodged in my throat like broken glass. I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for months. Hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, client meetings I wasn't invited to, financial reports that somehow never made it to my desk on time. But I'd been too trusting, too naive to believe my own mother would orchestrate my professional execution. "The paperwork is already drawn up," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package, $1.2 million. More than fair, considering." Considering what? That I'd sacrificed my marriage to build this company? That I'd missed my daughter's school plays because I was courting clients in Denver and Phoenix? That I'd turned down 3 job offers from competitors because I believed in what we were building together? My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The legal language swam before my eyes, but the numbers were crystal clear. They were buying me out for a fraction of what my shares were actually worth. A fraction of what I'd earned. "This is insulting," I managed, my voice stronger now. Anger was replacing shock, and I welcomed it like an old friend. "My shares are worth at least 4 times this amount. You know that." Thatcher finally spoke, his voice carefully measured. "Jenny, the market's been volatile. The valuation reflects current conditions." He wouldn't meet my eyes, instead studying his phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. Current conditions. What a joke. Last quarter had been our best in 5 years. I knew because I'd landed the Morrison Industries account personally, working 16-hour days for 3 months straight. The same account that would probably be reassigned to Thatcher the moment I walked out that door. "I need time to think," I said, standing abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound like fingernails on chalkboard. "Of course, dear." My mother's smile was razor thin. "But don't take too long. The offer expires Friday. 3 days. She was giving me 3 days to decide whether to accept financial ruin or fight a battle I couldn't possibly win. I drove straight to Cassandra's office, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. If anyone would understand the magnitude of what had just happened, it would be her. Cassandra Webb had been my closest friend since law school, and more importantly, she was the only person who knew exactly how much Meridian was really worth. "They offered you what?" Cassandra's voice rose an octave as she set down her coffee mug with a sharp clink. Her corner office overlooked downtown, and the afternoon sun streaming through the windows made her silver hair look like spun metal. Genevieve, that's criminal. Your shares alone are worth at least $6 million, probably more with the Morrison contract. I sank deeper into the leather chair across from her desk, feeling the weight of 23 years pressing down on my shoulders. She knows exactly what she's doing, Cass. She's counting on me being too devastated to fight back, too loyal to cause a scene. Well, are you? Cassandra's dark eyes were sharp, assessing. This was why I'd come to her. She never let me wallow in self-pity. Because if you are, then she's right, and you deserve whatever scraps she throws you. The words stung, but they were exactly what I needed to hear. I sat up straighter, feeling something shift inside my chest. No, I'm not going to roll over and die just because Mommy Dearest decided I'm not worthy of the family business. Good. Cassandra leaned forward, her fingers steepled. Now, what are your real options here? Because fighting this in court could take years and cost more than you'd ever recover. I'd been thinking about that during the entire drive over. There was another way, something that would hurt them far more than any legal battle ever could. What if I sold my shares to someone else? Before Friday? To who? You can't just sell to anyone without board approval. And guess who controls the board? Sterling and Associates. The name felt dangerous on my tongue. They've been trying to acquire us for 2 years. They'd pay market value, maybe more, just to get a foothold. Cassandra's eyes widened. Sterling was Meridian's biggest competitor, the corporate giant that had been circling our client base like vultures. Selling to them wouldn't just be a betrayal, it would be an act of war. Genevieve, that would destroy them. Your mother would never forgive you. I thought about the cold dismissal in her voice, the way she'd called me dramatic, the years of being treated like an employee rather than a partner. Good. Maybe it's time she learned what real consequences feel like. That evening, I sat in my empty apartment staring at Sterling and Associates' website on my laptop screen. Marcus Sterling's professional headshot smiled back at me, silver-haired, confident, the kind of man who'd built an empire by being ruthless when necessary. We'd met twice at industry conferences, and both times he'd made subtle comments about how much he admired my work, how I was wasted at a small firm like Meridian. At the time, I'd thought he was just being polite. Now I wondered if he'd been planting seeds. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Emma. "Mom, heard about the meeting today. Thatcher called me. Are you okay?" Even my own daughter had heard about my humiliation before I'd had a chance to process it myself. The family network was already spinning the narrative, probably painting me as the ungrateful daughter who couldn't accept a generous offer. I could practically hear my mother's version. Poor Genevieve, always so emotional about business decisions. I called Emma instead of texting back. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, what happened?" Thatcher was being weird and evasive, which usually means something big is going down. Emma was 28, sharp as a blade, and working as a financial analyst in Chicago. She'd inherited my analytical mind, but thankfully not my tendency to trust people who didn't deserve it. "Your grandmother has decided to buy me out of the business." "What? Why would she do that? You built that place." The validation in her voice was like a balm on an open wound. She says it never really belonged to me, that it should stay with real family. That's complete garbage, Mom. You know that, right? You've been carrying that company for years. Half their major clients came through you. I know, sweetheart. The question is, what do I do about it? There was a pause, and I could almost hear Emma's mind working. What are your options? Please tell me you're not just going to take whatever insulting offer they made. I'm considering selling my shares to Sterling and Associates. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice careful. "Mom, that would be..." Nuclear. You know that, right? That would probably destroy Meridian entirely. Would that be such a terrible thing? The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. No, Emma said quietly. Actually, I think it would serve them right. When do you need to decide? Friday. Then you better make some calls tomorrow. And Mom, whatever you decide, I'm proud of you for not just rolling over. After we hung up, I stared at Marcus Sterling's contact information until the numbers blurred together. I called Marcus Sterling at 8 a.m. sharp on Thursday morning. My hands were steady now, my voice clear. I'd spent the night rehearsing exactly what I'd say, how I'd position this as a business opportunity rather than an act of revenge. Genevieve Hartwell, Marcus said warmly when his assistant put me through. This is an unexpected pleasure. What can I do for you? I have a proposition that might interest you. My 45% stake in Meridian Consulting is available for immediate purchase. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. When Marcus spoke again, his tone had shifted from casual to laser-focused. I'm listening. I need this done by tomorrow. Clean, legal, no complications. Are you interested? Very. Can you be in my office in 2 hours? The Sterling and Associates building was everything Meridian wasn't. Sleek glass and steel, marble floors, receptionists who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Marcus met me personally in the lobby, something that probably never happened for anyone below C-suite level. His office was twice the size of my mother's, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He poured coffee from an expensive-looking machine while I laid out the situation with clinical precision. I didn't mention the family drama, just the facts. I owned 45%. I wanted out, and I needed it handled immediately. What's your asking price? He asked, settling back in his chair. $7.2 million. The number came out stronger than I felt. It was more than market value, but not unreasonably so. If he wanted to hurt Meridian, he'd pay it. Marcus didn't even blink. Done. My lawyers can have the paperwork ready by end of business today. Just like that. Genevieve, I've been trying to get a foothold in Meridian for 3 years. Your mother has rebuffed every overture, every partnership proposal. You're handing me exactly what I need to compete directly with her client base. He leaned forward. The question is, why are you doing this? This isn't just about money. For a moment, I considered lying, maintaining the professional facade. But something in his expression told me he already knew this was personal. My family decided I don't belong in the business I helped build. They're buying me out for less than a quarter of what my shares are worth. And now you're making sure they pay the real price. Now I'm making sure they understand consequences. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. I think we're going to work very well together. In fact, I'd like to offer you a consulting position once this is finalized. Your client relationships alone are worth more than what I'm paying you. The irony was perfect. Not only would I walk away with financial security, but I'd also have a front-row seat to watch Meridian crumble. By 6 p.m. Thursday, I was signing the final documents in Sterling's conference room. The lawyers had worked with military precision, and Marcus had clearly made this his top priority. Every signature felt like a small act of rebellion, every initial a declaration of independence from 23 years of being treated as less than. Congratulations, Marcus said as I signed the last page. You're now $7.2 million richer, and I'm now a 45% stakeholder in Meridian Consulting. The wire transfer would hit my account within 24 hours. I'd gone from facing financial ruin to achieving more security than I'd ever imagined, all because my mother had underestimated me so completely. When will you notify them? I asked, sliding the documents across the mahogany table. First thing tomorrow morning. I'll call your mother personally to schedule a board meeting. Very professional, very courteous. His smile was predatory. I imagine she'll be quite surprised. I drove home in a daze. my phone buzzing constantly with texts from Emma asking for updates. But I couldn't bring myself to respond yet. The magnitude of what I'd just done was starting to sink in. There would be no going back from this. No family dinners, no pretending everything was fine, no more chances for reconciliation. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation with Marcus, wondering if I'd made the right choice or if I'd just destroyed everything out of spite. But every time I started to doubt myself, I remembered the cold dismissal in my mother's voice, the way she'd called me dramatic, the insulting offer that treated me like a nuisance to be bought off. I'd spent decades trying to earn her respect, her approval, her acknowledgement that I was worthy of the family business. And she'd responded by trying to push me out entirely. At 7 a.m. Friday morning, my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed my mother's name, and my stomach clenched instinctively. But I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted to savor this moment, the last few minutes before the explosion. The phone rang again, then again. By 8 a.m., I had 12 missed calls from various family members. By 9, it was 25. They were starting to panic, probably wondering why Marcus Sterling was calling to schedule an emergency board meeting. I made coffee, took a shower, and got dressed with deliberate slowness. Each mundane action felt significant somehow, like I was preparing for a battle I'd already won. When I finally turned my phone back on at 10 a.m., I had 37 missed calls and counting. The first voicemail was from Thatcher, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Jenny, what the hell is going on? Marcus Sterling called Mom this morning about some board meeting. Call me back immediately." The second was from my mother, and her tone had shifted from the cold dismissal of 2 days ago to something approaching desperation. "Genevieve, we need to talk. There seems to be some confusion about your shares. Please call me as soon as you get this." Confusion. As if I'd accidentally stumbled into selling my life's work to their biggest competitor. By noon, I had 53 missed calls. The voicemails were getting increasingly frantic. Thatcher's voice cracked on the fifth message. "Jenny, please, just tell me you didn't do what I think you did. We can fix this. Whatever Mom said, we can work it out." Too late for that, I thought, pouring myself a second cup of coffee and settling onto my couch. The wire transfer notification had come through at 11:30. $7.2 million minus taxes, sitting in my checking account like a middle finger to every family member who'd ever treated me like hired help. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Richardson, your mother's attorney. Legal action will be pursued if you don't respond within the hour. This sale is invalid and will be reversed." I screenshot the message and sent it to Cassandra with a laugh-crying emoji. Her response came back within minutes. "Let them try. The sale is airtight. You owned the shares free and clear." The 68th missed call came at 2:15 p.m. By then, I'd stopped counting. My phone was buzzing so constantly it sounded like an angry bee trapped in a jar. I finally turned it off and went for a walk around the neighborhood, breathing in the crisp autumn air and feeling lighter than I had in years. When I returned an hour later, there was a black Mercedes in my driveway. My mother sat in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead with the engine running. She'd never come to my apartment before, never even asked for the address. I walked slowly to the passenger side and got in without saying a word. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, broken only by the quiet hum of the heater. $7.2 million, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Market value," I replied. "Maybe you should have offered that on Tuesday." She turned to look at me then, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw fear in her eyes. Real, genuine terror. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Sterling will gut us. He'll steal our clients, undercut our prices, destroy everything we've built." "Everything you've built," I corrected. "Remember? It never belonged to me anyway." "You want to know what I've done?" I turned in the passenger seat to face her fully, seeing her not as the intimidating matriarch who'd controlled my life for decades, but as a woman who'd finally overplayed her hand. I've shown you what happens when you underestimate someone you've spent 23 years taking for granted. Her knuckles were white against the steering wheel. This isn't just about you anymore, Genevieve. Think about the employees. Think about Thatcher's future. Think about what, Mom? The same employees you were planning to lay off once you consolidated my client accounts? The same future you were securing for Thatcher by stealing my equity? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't family enough to deserve what I'd earned. She flinched like I'd slapped her. For a moment, the mask slipped completely, and I saw something I'd never seen before, my mother, vulnerable and desperate. We can fix this. Sterling hasn't moved on anything yet. We could make a counteroffer, buy back your shares at the same price. With what money? I laughed, and it came out sharper than I intended. You offered me $1.2 million on Tuesday. Where are you going to find $7.2 million by Monday? The silence that followed was answer enough. They'd been so confident in their position, so certain I'd accept their insulting offer, that they hadn't prepared for any other scenario. They'd counted on my loyalty, my guilt, my desperate need for their approval. They'd miscalculated catastrophically. Sterling called this morning, she continued, her voice barely audible. He wants to meet Monday to discuss operational synergies. Do you know what that means? He's going to strip mine everything we've built. Our client relationships, our processes, our reputation. He'll take it all and leave us with nothing. The way you were planning to leave me with nothing? She turned away, staring out the windshield at nothing. When she spoke again, her voice was hollow. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought you'd fight for your place. I thought you'd prove you deserved to be there. By accepting scraps? By begging for what was already mine? I shook my head. That's not fighting, Mom. That's surrender. And I'm done surrendering to people who see me as disposable. So what happens now? She asked. You destroy us and walk away? I thought about Marcus's job offer, about the consulting position that would let me rebuild everything I'd lost while watching my family's empire crumble. I thought about Emma's proud voice on the phone, about Cassandra's fierce support, about the $7.2 million that represented more than money. It represented freedom. Now you learn to live with the consequences of treating your daughter like a stranger. I got out of the car without another word, leaving my mother sitting in my driveway with the engine running. Through my living room window, I watched her sit there for another 10 minutes, her shoulders shaking in what might have been sobs. Part of me, the part that had spent 48 years trying to earn her love, wanted to go back out there. But that part was smaller now, quieter. The woman who'd built a consulting empire from nothing deserved better than begging for scraps from people who'd never valued her contributions. The Mercedes finally pulled away, and I felt something settle in my chest. Relief, maybe, or just the absence of a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there. Monday morning, I walked into Sterling & Associates as their newest senior consultant. Marcus had kept his word. My office was on the executive floor, with a view of the city and a salary that dwarfed what I'd made at Meridian. More importantly, I had something I'd never had before: respect from day one. No proving myself, no earning my place. Just acknowledgement of what I brought to the table. The Meridian integration is moving faster than expected, Marcus told me during our first meeting. 3 of their major clients have already reached out about transferring their accounts. Apparently, word gets around when a company's stability is in question. I nodded, trying to feel satisfaction instead of the hollow ache in my stomach. Those were clients I'd cultivated, relationships I'd built over years of late nights and weekend calls. Now they were abandoning ship, and I was partially responsible for that chaos. "Any word from your family?" he asked carefully. Thatcher called yesterday. He wanted to know if I was happy with myself. I managed a bitter smile. I told him happiness wasn't the point. Consequences were. The truth was more complicated. I wasn't happy, exactly. I was financially secure, professionally respected, and finally free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my adult life. But I was also alone in a way I'd never been before. Emma still called every day, but even she was struggling with the magnitude of what I'd done. "I support you, Mom," she'd said during our last conversation, "but I'm also grieving the family I thought we had." That grief was mutual. I'd gained my independence and lost my history. I'd won the war and destroyed the battlefield. Some nights I lay awake wondering if there had been another way, a path that didn't require scorching the earth behind me. But then I remembered Tuesday's meeting, the casual cruelty in my mother's voice, the decades of being treated as expendable, and I knew I'd made the only choice that preserved my dignity. 6 months later, I was sitting in my corner office reviewing quarterly reports when Cassandra called with news that shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow still did. "Meridian filed for bankruptcy protection yesterday," she said without preamble. "They're liquidating assets to pay creditors." I set down my coffee and stared out the window at the city below. In the distance, I could see the building where I'd spent 23 years of my life, where I'd poured my heart into something I'd believed would last forever. Now it was just another failed business, another cautionary tale about what happens when pride overrides wisdom. "How's your mother handling it?" Cassandra asked gently. "I wouldn't know. We haven't spoken since that day in my driveway." The words came out steadier than I felt. "Thatcher sends updates through Emma sometimes. Mom had to sell the house. She's living in a condo now, working as a freelance consultant." The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother, who'd spent decades looking down on independent consultants as somehow lesser than firm owners, was now exactly what she'd once dismissed. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. Sterling had promoted me to vice president last month, and I was earning more than I ever had at Meridian. My client relationships had followed me seamlessly, and I'd brought in $12 million in new business since joining. Marcus treated me as an equal partner in strategy sessions, sought my opinion on major decisions, never once questioned whether I belonged at the table. But success felt different than I'd expected. Hollow in some ways, complete in others. I had everything I'd wanted professionally, but the cost had been higher than I'd calculated. Emma visited for holidays, but our conversations carefully avoided family topics. I'd gained a career and lost a history. Last week, I'd run into one of Meridian's former employees at a coffee shop downtown, Janet from accounting, who'd always remembered my birthday and asked about Emma's college applications. She'd looked through me like I was a stranger, her face carefully neutral as she ordered her drink and left without acknowledgement. I understood her reaction. In her mind, I was the woman who destroyed her job, her security, her workplace family. She wasn't wrong. I'd made a choice that prioritized my dignity over dozens of other people's livelihoods. I lived with that knowledge every day. But I also lived with the knowledge that I'd finally stood up for myself after nearly 50 years of accepting less than I deserved. I'd refused to be diminished, dismissed, or discarded. I'd chosen respect over reconciliation, consequences over compromise. Some nights, I wondered if there had been another way. Most days, I knew there hadn't. My family had made their choice when they decided I was expendable. I'd simply made mine. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from.